The military checkpoint buzzed with its usual morning chaos. Soldiers in crisp uniforms checked documents, their boots clicking against the concrete as they moved between vehicles. Commander Marcus Rodriguez stood tall near the main gate, his decorated chest catching the early sunlight. At 35, he had earned his reputation through years of service, and his stern expression rarely softened for anyone. The black sedan approached the checkpoint like any other vehicle that morning. Marcus barely glanced up from his clipboard until his sergeant approached with an unusual expression. "Sir, there's a woman here requesting special clearance. Says she has important business with the base commander." Marcus looked up, his dark eyes scanning the area until they landed on her. She stood beside the sedan with perfect posture, wearing a simple black dress that somehow commanded attention without being flashy. Her auburn hair was pulled back neatly, and she held a small leather briefcase in her hands. There was something about her presence that made the busy checkpoint seem to pause, though Marcus couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. Another one of those political wives trying to pull strings, Marcus muttered under his breath, walking toward the woman with his characteristic confident stride. He had dealt with countless influential people who thought their connections could get them special treatment. This would be no different. As he approached, the woman turned to face him directly. Her green eyes met his without flinching, and Marcus noticed she didn't seem nervous or intimidated like most civilians at military checkpoints. Instead, she appeared calm and composed, as if she belonged there. "Ma'am, I understand you're requesting special clearance," Marcus said, his voice carrying the authority he had perfected over years of command. "I'm Commander Rodriguez. I'll need to see your identification and know the nature of your business here." The woman nodded politely and reached into her briefcase, pulling out a folder of documents. As she handed them over, Marcus caught a glimpse of her hands. They were steady, with calluses that suggested she wasn't just another pampered civilian seeking favors. "My business is quite urgent." "Commander," she said, her voice clear and professional, "I believe you'll find my credentials are in order." Marcus opened the folder and began scanning the documents. They appeared legitimate. Government seals, official letterheads, and security clearances that seemed authentic. But something nagged at him. The paperwork was almost too perfect, and the woman's calm demeanor in a high-security military environment struck him as unusual. "These documents authorize access to classified areas," Marcus said, looking up from the papers with suspicion. "That's highly unusual for a civilian contractor. What exactly is your role in this operation?" The woman smiled slightly, and Marcus noticed it didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm here to conduct a security assessment, Commander. My company specializes in identifying vulnerabilities in military installations." Marcus felt his jaw tighten. Security assessments meant outside oversight, which usually translated to criticism of his command. He had worked too hard to build his reputation to have some civilian contractor come in and point out supposed flaws in his operation. "And who exactly authorized this assessment?" Marcus asked, his tone becoming more challenging. "Because I wasn't informed of any scheduled security reviews. The authorization comes from quite high up the chain of command," the woman replied smoothly. "I'm sure you understand that such operations require a certain level of discretion." Marcus studied her face, looking for any sign of deception. Her expression remained neutral, professional, but there was something in her eyes that suggested she was accustomed to being questioned and had prepared for exactly this conversation. "I'll need to verify these documents," Marcus said, holding up the folder. "Standard procedure for anyone requesting access to sensitive areas." "Of course," the woman agreed. "I would expect nothing less from a commander with your reputation." Marcus felt a slight surge of pride at the compliment, though he tried not to show it. "You seem to know something about my service record." "I make it my business to know about the people I'll be working with," she replied. "Your record is quite impressive, Commander Rodriguez. Afghanistan, Iraq, several commendations for exceptional service." Marcus found himself both flattered and suspicious. It was unusual for contractors to research personnel files so thoroughly, but it also suggested she was professional and prepared. Still, something about the whole situation felt off. "While I appreciate your thoroughness," Marcus said, "I hope you understand that security is my top priority here. I don't take risks with the safety of my personnel or the integrity of this installation." "I wouldn't expect you to," the woman said. "In fact, that's exactly the kind of attitude that makes this assessment valuable. We're not here to find fault, Commander. We're here to ensure that security protocols are as strong as they can possibly be. Marcus glanced back at his sergeant, who was watching the exchange with interest. The morning checkpoint routine was continuing around them, but Marcus could sense that his interaction with this mysterious woman was drawing attention from his subordinates. "What's your name?" Marcus asked suddenly, realizing he had been so focused on her credentials that he hadn't asked for basic identification. The woman looked directly into his eyes, and for just a moment, Marcus thought he saw something flicker across her expression, a brief hesitation that seemed completely at odds with her confident demeanor. "My name," she said slowly, as if weighing each word carefully, "is Sarah Chen." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, though he couldn't immediately understand why. The name seemed familiar, tugging at a memory he couldn't quite grasp. Sarah Chen? Where had he heard that name before? "Chen," he repeated, his voice unconsciously dropping to a more serious tone. "That name sounds familiar." Sarah's composed expression never wavered, but Marcus could swear he saw her jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "It's a common name, Commander." But Marcus was already searching his memory, trying to place where he had encountered that name before. Something important. Something that had stuck with him despite the countless names and faces he had encountered during his military career. The feeling was growing stronger, and with it came an uncomfortable sensation that this encounter was about to become much more complicated than a routine security check. Marcus stared at Sarah Chen, his mind racing through files and briefings from years past. The name echoed in his memory like a warning bell, but the pieces weren't quite fitting together yet. He had built his career on attention to detail, and something about this woman was setting off every instinct he had developed over decades of military service. "Commander, is there a problem?" Sarah asked, her voice remaining steady despite the intensity of his gaze. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he found himself studying her features more carefully. The shape of her eyes, the way she held herself, the small scar barely visible near her left temple. These details meant something, but the connection remained just out of reach. "Sergeant Williams," Marcus called to his subordinate without taking his eyes off Sarah. "I need you to run a complete background verification on these documents. Full database search." "Yes, sir," Williams replied. Moving quickly toward the checkpoint's communication center, Sarah watched the sergeant walk away, then turned back to Marcus with what appeared to be mild curiosity. "You seem unusually thorough, Commander. Is there something specific you're concerned about?" "I didn't get to my position by ignoring my instincts," Marcus replied, his tone becoming more formal. "And right now my instincts are telling me that this situation isn't as straightforward as it appears." "Sometimes our instincts can mislead us," Sarah said quietly. "Especially when we're dealing with situations that remind us of past experiences." Marcus felt his jaw clench. There was something in the way she said it, as if she knew exactly what memories were stirring in his mind. "What kind of past experiences are you referring to?" "The kind that shape us," Sarah replied. "The kind that make us who we are today." Marcus was growing increasingly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. Sarah Chen seemed to be speaking in riddles, and her calm demeanor in the face of his obvious suspicion was beginning to feel less professional and more deliberately provocative. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to be more specific about your business here," Marcus said, his commander voice taking on a harder edge. "Vague answers aren't going to cut it at a secure military installation." "Of course," Sarah said, opening her briefcase again. "Perhaps this will help clarify things." She pulled out a photograph and handed it to Marcus. It was a military unit photo, the kind taken before deployments. Marcus recognized the format immediately. He had dozens of similar photos from his own service. But as he looked at the faces in the picture, his blood began to run cold. The photo showed a small special operations team, men and women in desert camouflage, standing in front of a military transport vehicle. The landscape behind them was unmistakably Afghanistan. Marcus could tell from the distinctive mountainous terrain and the quality of light that characterized that region. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked, his voice becoming dangerously quiet. "Look at the faces, Commander," Sarah said simply. "Really look at them." Marcus's eyes scanned the photo more carefully. He recognized some of the faces. Soldiers he had worked with, commanded, served alongside. But as his gaze moved across the image, it stopped abruptly on one face in particular, A young woman, maybe 25 years old, wearing the same desert camouflage as the others. Her hair was shorter then, pulled back in a regulation style, and her face was leaner, harder. But the eyes were unmistakable. The same green eyes that were now watching him from across the checkpoint. Marcus felt the world tilt slightly. The photograph fell from his suddenly unsteady hands, but Sarah caught it before it hit the ground. Operation Desert Shield. Marcus whispered, the words coming out like a confession. 4th Special Operations Unit, Afghanistan 2019. You remember, Sarah said, and for the first time her professional mask slipped slightly. There was something raw in her voice, something that spoke of old wounds and unfinished business. Marcus remembered everything now. The mission that had gone wrong. The intelligence failure that had cost lives. The young female operative who had been listed as missing in action, presumed dead, after an explosion that had torn through their forward operating base. Chen, Sarah, Staff Sergeant, Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. MIA, status unknown. Status very much known, Sarah replied, her green eyes never leaving his face. I've been alive all this time, Commander Rodriguez. The question is, why did you leave me behind? The accusation hit Marcus like a physical blow. He remembered that day with crystal clarity now. The chaos, the incoming mortars, the impossible decision he had been forced to make, save the majority of his unit or risk everything to search for one missing soldier. The building collapsed, Marcus said, his voice defensive. We searched for hours. The intel said you were... The intel was wrong, Sarah interrupted, her composure finally cracking slightly. I was trapped, not dead. Trapped and waiting for extraction that never came. Marcus felt his world shifting beneath his feet. For 6 years he had carried the weight of that decision. He had convinced himself it was the right call. Save 8 lives instead of risking them all for one soldier who was probably already dead. But now that soldier was standing in front of him, very much alive, and every justification he had built for his actions was crumbling. How? Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he really wanted to know the answer. That's a very long story, Sarah said, her professional demeanor returning. One that involves a lot of time in enemy territory, learning to survive and eventually finding my own way out. Sergeant Williams approached from behind, holding a tablet with verification results. Commander, I've got the background check you requested. Marcus turned toward his sergeant, but his mind was still reeling from Sarah's revelation. What did you find? The documents check out, sir. Sarah Chen, current contractor with Homeland Security, high-level security clearance, specializes in vulnerability assessments for military installations. Williams paused, looking between Marcus and Sarah with growing confusion. But sir, there's something else. According to her service record, she was reported as MIA in Afghanistan in 2019. The file was never officially closed. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, feeling the weight of the past crashing down on him. When he opened them again, Sarah was watching him with an expression that mixed pain, anger, and something that might have been hope. Why are you here? Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. After all this time, why now? Sarah Chen straightened her shoulders, and Marcus saw a flash of the soldier she had once been. Because, Commander Rodriguez, we have unfinished business, and because there are some questions that need answers. Marcus realized that his carefully ordered world was about to be turned completely upside down. The woman he had thought was dead for 6 years was standing in front of him, and from the look in her eyes, she hadn't come just for a friendly reunion. Marcus dismissed Sergeant Williams with a gesture, his mind struggling to process the impossibility of Sarah's presence. As his subordinate walked away, confusion clear on his face, Marcus found himself alone with a ghost from his past. A ghost that was demanding answers he wasn't sure he was ready to give. We need to talk, Marcus said, his voice barely steady. Privately, Sarah nodded, her expression unreadable. I thought you'd never ask. Marcus led her toward a small office building adjacent to the main checkpoint. His legs felt unsteady, as if the ground beneath him had become uncertain. 6 years of guilt, 6 years of sleepless nights wondering if he had made the right decision, and now the person at the center of those doubts was walking beside him. The office was spartanly furnished, a metal desk, 2 chairs and a map of the base on the wall. Marcus closed the door and gestured for Sarah to sit, but she remained standing, her posture military straight despite her civilian clothes. You want to know how I survived? Sarah said, not waiting for him to speak. You want to know where I've been for 6 years and why I'm here now? Marcus sat heavily in his chair, suddenly feeling much older than his 35 years. Yes, I want to know all of that. Sarah moved to the window, looking out at the busy base beyond. When that building collapsed, I wasn't killed. I was trapped in what used to be a basement, pinned under debris but alive. I could hear the search teams above me for the first few hours. Marcus felt his throat constrict. We looked for you. We looked for 8 hours straight. I know, Sarah said, her voice softer now. I could hear your voice giving orders, coordinating the search. I kept thinking, any minute now they'll find me. But then the voices stopped. The intel came in, Marcus said, his words coming out like a confession. Satellite imagery showed massive structural damage. The analyst said there was no way anyone could have survived in that section of the building. Sarah turned from the window to face him. The analysts were wrong. But you made the call to pull out the search teams anyway. Marcus stood up abruptly, pacing to the other side of the small room. I had 8 other soldiers whose lives were at risk. The area was taking heavy fire and we had orders to withdraw. I couldn't justify losing more people on what everyone believed was a hopeless search. Everyone except me, Sarah said quietly. You were presumed dead. Marcus's voice rose, then he caught himself and lowered it again. The structural engineers, the intelligence analysts, even the medical team said survival was impossible. Sarah's expression remained steady, but Marcus could see something flickering behind her eyes, old pain that had never quite healed. It took me 3 days to dig myself out. 3 days with a dislocated shoulder, 2 broken ribs, and a concussion. Marcus felt his stomach drop. 3 days? The building had created a small pocket where I was trapped. There was enough air, and some of the survival supplies from our gear had fallen into the space with me. I rationed water and waited for rescue that never came. Marcus sank back into his chair, the full weight of what had happened finally hitting him. If we had kept searching, you would have found me, Sarah finished. Alive. Injured but alive. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of unspoken guilt and pain. Marcus found himself reliving that terrible day, second-guessing every decision he had made, wondering how different things might have been if he had trusted his instincts over the intelligence reports. What happened after you got out? Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah moved away from the window and finally sat down across from him. I was alone behind enemy lines with no communication equipment and no way to contact base. I was injured, disoriented, and presumed dead by my own unit. How did you survive? Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. I did what I had to do. I found shelter, treated my injuries as best I could, and started moving toward friendly territory. It took me 2 weeks to make contact with Allied forces. Marcus leaned forward, dreading the answer to his next question. Why didn't you come back immediately? Why didn't you report in? For the first time since revealing her identity, Sarah looked away from him. By the time I reached safety, I had learned some things. Things about our mission, about the intelligence that led us into that trap, about why our location was compromised. What kind of things? Sarah met his eyes again, and Marcus saw a hardness there that hadn't been present in the young soldier he remembered, the kind of things that made me realize that coming back might not be safe. For me or for anyone else. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What are you saying? I'm saying that Operation Desert Shield wasn't just a mission that went wrong, Marcus. It was a setup. Someone wanted our unit eliminated, and they very nearly succeeded. The room seemed to grow colder. Marcus had commanded that operation, had trusted the intelligence that led them into what turned out to be a trap. If Sarah was right, if someone had deliberately fed them false information, that's impossible, Marcus said. But even as he spoke the words, he could hear the doubt in his own voice. Is it? Sarah asked. Think about it. Perfect intelligence about a high-value target, a location that turned out to be heavily fortified and waiting for us, an escape route that led directly into an ambush. Marcus's mind raced back through the details of that mission. At the time, he had attributed the problems to bad luck and the unpredictable nature of combat. But looking at it through Sarah's perspective, he could see how the pieces might fit together differently. Even if that's true, Marcus said slowly, why didn't you report it when you made it back to Allied territory? Sarah's expression hardened. Because I didn't know who to trust. Our mission had been classified at the highest levels. Only a handful of people knew our location and objectives. If someone had set us up, it had to be someone with access to that information. Marcus felt his world tilting again. If Sarah was right, then everything he thought he knew about that mission, about his own service, about the people he had trusted, might be built on lies. "Why are you telling me this now?" Marcus asked. "Why come here after all this time?" Sarah reached into her briefcase and pulled out another folder, thicker than the first. "Because I've spent the last 6 years investigating what really happened that day. And I finally have proof." She slid the folder across the desk to Marcus. His hands shook slightly as he opened it, revealing photographs, documents, financial records, and communication transcripts. "The truth." "Commander," Sarah said, her voice steady but charged with emotion, "the complete truth about Operation Desert Shield, about who betrayed us, and about why I've been hunting them for 6 years." Marcus stared down at the documents, knowing that whatever he found in that folder would change everything. The comfortable certainties of his career, his reputation, his understanding of his own past, all of it was about to be called into question by the woman he had left for dead 6 years ago. Marcus's hands trembled as he opened the folder Sarah had placed before him. The first document was a bank statement, showing a series of large deposits into an account he didn't recognize. The amounts were substantial, more money than most soldiers would see in years of service. "What am I looking at?" Marcus asked, though a sick feeling in his stomach suggested he already knew. "Payment records," Sarah said, her voice clinical and cold. "Money transfers from a shell company with ties to enemy operatives. The deposits started 3 weeks before our mission and continued for 6 months afterward." Marcus flipped to the next document. Communication. Records showing encrypted messages between an unknown sender and recipients in Afghanistan. The timestamp showed the messages were sent just hours before their unit had moved into position for Operation Desert Shield. "Someone was feeding information to the enemy," Marcus said, the words tasting bitter in his mouth. "Not just someone," Sarah replied. "Someone with intimate knowledge of our mission parameters, our route, our timing. Someone who knew exactly where we would be and when." Marcus continued reading, his disbelief growing with each page. Financial records, communication intercepts, surveillance photos. Sarah had assembled a comprehensive case that painted a picture of systematic betrayal. "How did you get all this?" Marcus asked, looking up from the documents. 6 years of careful investigation," Sarah said. "I couldn't trust official channels, so I had to work outside the system. I learned new skills, made contacts in places you wouldn't expect, and slowly pieced together what really happened." Marcus reached the most damning document in the file, a decoded message that contained specific details about their mission that should have been known only to their command structure. The message had been sent to enemy forces 12 hours before their unit moved into position. "This is impossible," Marcus whispered, but the evidence was undeniable. "Keep reading," Sarah said quietly. Marcus turned the page and found himself staring at a photograph that made his blood run cold. It showed a man in military uniform meeting with known enemy operatives in what appeared to be a clandestine location. The man's face was clearly visible, and Marcus recognized him immediately. "General Patterson," Marcus breathed. Colonel Patterson had been their commanding officer during Operation Desert Shield. He had been the one to brief Marcus on the mission, provide the intelligence, and authorize the operation. Marcus had trusted him completely, had considered him a mentor and friend. Patterson was selling information, Sarah said, watching Marcus's face carefully. He had gambling debts, a failing marriage, and access to some of the most sensitive intelligence in the military. The enemy found him and made him an offer he couldn't refuse. Marcus felt nauseated. General Patterson, now General Patterson, having been promoted in the years since Afghanistan, was a decorated officer with an exemplary service record. The idea that he could be a traitor was almost impossible to accept. "He set us up," Marcus said, the full implications finally hitting him. "He sent us into a trap knowing we wouldn't come back." "He sent you into a trap hoping you wouldn't come back," Sarah corrected. "But he underestimated your leadership and the skill of your team. Most of you survived, which created a problem for him." Marcus looked up from the documents, his mind racing. "That's why you didn't come back immediately?" "You suspected something," Sarah nodded. "When I finally made it to Allied territory, I started asking questions about how our mission had been compromised. The official reports didn't add up. Too many coincidences, too many convenient explanations. So you've been investigating this for 6 years, Marcus said, beginning to understand the scope of what Sarah had undertaken. I've been hunting him for 6 years, Sarah corrected, her voice hardening. Patterson continued his activities after Afghanistan. He's been selling information to foreign operatives, terrorist organizations, anyone willing to pay. The blood of dozens of soldiers is on his hands. Marcus set the documents down, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what Sarah was revealing. Why come to me? Why now? Sarah leaned forward, her green eyes intense. Because Patterson is being considered for promotion to chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If that happens, he'll have access to the highest levels of military intelligence. He'll be able to do damage that makes his previous betrayals look insignificant. Marcus felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. What do you want from me? I want justice, Sarah said simply. But I can't get it alone. My evidence is solid, but it was gathered through unofficial channels. I need someone with credibility. Someone in the military structure who can bring this forward through proper channels. And you think that's me? Sarah's expression softened slightly. You're not just anyone, Marcus. You're the commanding officer who led that mission. You're the one who made the impossible decision to leave me behind. Your word carries weight. Marcus stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the base where he had built his career. Everything he thought he knew about his service, about the people he had trusted, was crumbling around him. If what you're saying is true, Marcus said slowly, then my entire career has been built on a lie. Every promotion, every commendation, every moment of pride I felt, it's all tainted by what happened that day. Not tainted, Sarah said, standing and moving to join him at the window. Used. Patterson used your guilt over my supposed death to manipulate you. He knew you would work twice as hard, be twice as careful to make up for what you thought was your failure. Marcus turned to look at her, seeing her clearly for the first time since her revelation. You've been carrying this alone for 6 years. I've been carrying this because no one else could, Sarah replied. Because I was the only one who survived to tell the truth about what really happened. Marcus felt a surge of emotion, guilt, anger, respect, and something that might have been admiration for the woman who had endured so much to seek justice. What's your plan? Marcus asked. Sarah smiled for the first time since revealing her identity, and Marcus saw a glimpse of the determined soldier he remembered. I'm going to expose Patterson for what he is, but I need your help to do it properly. What kind of help? The kind that requires you to trust me, Sarah said. The same way I'm trusting you now, despite everything that happened between us. Marcus looked down at the folder of evidence, then back at Sarah's face. The woman he had thought was dead for 6 years was asking him to help her bring down a general, to risk his career and reputation on the word of someone who had every reason to hate him. But as he looked into her eyes, Marcus realized that Sarah Chen wasn't asking for revenge. She was asking for justice, and after 6 years of guilt and self-doubt, Marcus finally had a chance to make things right. What do you need me to do? Marcus asked. Sarah's smile widened, and for a moment, Marcus caught a glimpse of the young soldier who had once served under his command. Determined, brave, and absolutely unstoppable when she believed in a cause. I need you to help me catch a traitor, Sarah said, and I need you to do it without letting him know we're coming. Marcus spent the next hour studying every document in Sarah's folder, cross-referencing dates and details with his own memories of Operation Desert Shield. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of General Patterson's betrayal, and with that clarity came a burning anger that Marcus had to work hard to control. The promotion ceremony is in 3 weeks, Sarah explained, sitting across from Marcus as he absorbed the final documents. Once Patterson becomes chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he'll be virtually untouchable. We have to move before then. Marcus set down the last photograph, another image of Patterson meeting with foreign operatives, this one taken just 6 months ago. How do we approach this? If we go through normal channels, Patterson might get wind of the investigation. We don't go through normal channels, Sarah said, her eyes glinting with determination. We set a trap. Marcus looked up sharply. What kind of trap? Sarah opened her briefcase again and pulled out a small electronic device that Marcus didn't recognize. This is a recording device, military grade, undetectable by standard sweeping equipment. It can capture both audio and video in high definition. You want to record him admitting to treason? I want to catch him in the act, Sarah corrected. Patterson is still selling information. My sources indicate he has a meeting scheduled with foreign operatives next week. If we can document that meeting, record the transaction, we'll have irrefutable proof of his current activities. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. That's incredibly dangerous. If we're caught, we'll be court-martialed at best, Sarah said matter-of-factly. But if we don't act, Patterson will continue destroying lives from the highest levels of military command. Marcus stood and paced the small office, his mind working through the implications. Where is this meeting supposed to take place? Washington, D.C. There's a private club where Patterson regularly meets with foreign dignitaries. It provides perfect cover for his activities. How do you know all this? Sarah's expression became guarded. I've been watching him for months. I know his patterns, his contacts, his methods. He thinks he's careful, but he's grown complacent over the years. Marcus stopped pacing and looked directly at Sarah. You've been planning this for a long time. 6 years, Sarah admitted, ever since I figured out what really happened in Afghanistan. This isn't just about justice, Marcus. It's about preventing future betrayals, future deaths. Marcus understood the weight of what Sarah was asking. His career, his reputation, everything he had worked for would be at risk. But the alternative, allowing Patterson to continue his treachery from the highest levels of command, was unthinkable. What's the plan? Marcus asked. Sarah pulled out a detailed floor plan of the private club. Patterson always meets his contacts in a private dining room on the 3rd floor. Security is minimal. The club relies on discretion rather than protection. We can get recording equipment into the room beforehand. Marcus studied the layout, his tactical training automatically identifying potential problems. Access to the building? I have an invitation to a charity event being held at the club the same night. Corporate security consulting has its privileges. And how do I fit into this? Sarah looked at him seriously. You don't. This part I do alone. Marcus shook his head immediately. Absolutely not. If you're going in there, you're not going without backup. Marcus, you can't be directly involved in the surveillance operation. If something goes wrong, your career will be destroyed. My career will be destroyed anyway if Patterson discovers what we know. Marcus pointed out. Besides, I'm not letting you face this alone. Not again. Sarah studied his face, and Marcus saw something shift in her expression. A recognition of the commitment he was making, and perhaps a grudging respect for his determination. All right, Sarah said finally, but we do this my way. I've been planning this operation for months, and I know every detail. Marcus nodded. What do you need from me? I need you to be my emergency backup. Stay outside the building, monitor communications, and be ready to extract me if something goes wrong. And if we get the evidence we need? Sarah's expression hardened. Then we take it directly to the Pentagon Inspector General's office. I have contacts there who can ensure the evidence is handled properly and that Patterson can't suppress the investigation. Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and dread. After 6 years of guilt over leaving Sarah behind, he finally had a chance to make things right. But the stakes were enormous, and failure would mean the destruction of everything he had worked for. There's something else, Sarah said, her voice becoming quieter. Something I need you to understand before we do this. Marcus waited, sensing that whatever she was about to say was important. I don't blame you for what happened in Afghanistan, Sarah said, meeting his eyes directly. You made the best decision you could with the information you had. Patterson is the one who created that situation, not you. Marcus felt something tight in his chest begin to loosen. For 6 years, he had carried the weight of Sarah's supposed death, believing that his decision had cost a soldier's life. Hearing her absolve him of that guilt was more meaningful than any commendation or promotion he had ever received. Why are you telling me this now? Marcus asked. Because I need you to understand that this isn't about revenge, Sarah said. This is about justice. And justice requires clear thinking, not emotional baggage. Marcus nodded, feeling a sense of clarity he hadn't experienced in years. When do we move? The meeting is scheduled for Thursday night, Sarah said. That gives us 5 days to prepare. Marcus looked down at the evidence folder, then back at Sarah's determined face. The woman he had thought was dead was asking him to help her bring down a general, to risk everything on a dangerous operation that could either save countless lives or destroy their own. But as Marcus considered the alternative, allowing Patterson to continue his betrayal, from the highest levels of command, he realized there was really no choice at all. All right, Marcus said. extending his hand to Sarah. Let's catch a traitor. Thursday evening arrived with an unseasonable chill in Washington, D.C. Marcus sat in a rental car across the street from the exclusive Meridian Club, watching well-dressed guests arrive for the charity gala that would provide Sarah's cover. His earpiece crackled softly with static as he monitored the communication channel they had established. Eagle 1 in position. Sarah's voice came through clearly. She had chosen the call sign deliberately. It had been her designation during Operation Desert Shield, before everything went wrong. Copy that, Eagle 1, Marcus responded, his eyes scanning the street for any signs of surveillance or unusual activity. Target vehicle approaching from the north. A black sedan with diplomatic plates pulled up to the club's valet station. Marcus watched through binoculars as General Patterson stepped out, wearing a formal military dress uniform that gleamed with ribbons and decorations. The sight of the man who had betrayed his unit made Marcus's jaw clench with barely controlled anger. Target is entering the building, Marcus reported, wearing full dress uniform. He's confident tonight. Too confident, Sarah replied. I'm moving to the 3rd floor. Recording equipment is already in place. Marcus had spent the previous 3 days helping Sarah plan every detail of the operation. They had studied the club's layout, identified security cameras, and even practiced the timing of Sarah's movements. The recording devices were state-of-the-art equipment that Sarah had acquired through her security consulting connections, devices, so small they could be hidden behind picture frames in air. Fence security sweep complete, Sarah reported 20 minutes later. 2 guards on the ground floor, 1 at the main entrance. No roving patrols on the upper levels. Marcus checked his watch. According to Sarah's intelligence, Patterson's meeting was scheduled to begin at 9:30. It was now 9:15. Movement on the 3rd floor, Sarah whispered. Patterson just entered the private dining room. He's alone. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. Everything depended on the next hour. If Sarah could record Patterson's meeting with foreign operatives, they would have the evidence needed to expose his treachery. If something went wrong, 2 men approaching the building, Marcus reported, spotting figures moving toward the club's side entrance, both wearing dark suits, moving with purpose. Could be our targets. Confirmed, Sarah said. I can see them through the hallway window. Middle Eastern features, expensive clothing. They match the descriptions from my surveillance. Marcus watched the 2 men enter the building through a service entrance that bypassed the main security checkpoint. Patterson had clearly arranged for them to avoid scrutiny. They're heading upstairs, Sarah reported. I'm activating the recording devices now. Marcus gripped the steering wheel tightly, every instinct screaming at him to go inside and provide backup. But Sarah was right. His presence would only complicate things if the operation went sideways. Contact established, Sarah whispered. Patterson is greeting them in Arabic. Fluent pronunciation. For the next 45 minutes, Marcus listened as Sarah provided periodic updates. The meeting was proceeding exactly as she had predicted. Patterson was providing classified intelligence in exchange for substantial payments. The recording devices were capturing everything, building an airtight case against the general. Payment being made, Sarah reported. Cash transaction appears to be several $100,000. Marcus felt a surge of satisfaction. They had him. After 6 years of planning and investigation, Sarah had finally caught Patterson in the act of treason. They're concluding the meeting, Sarah said. Foreign operatives are leaving first. Marcus watched the 2 men exit through the same side entrance they had used to enter. They moved quickly to a waiting car and disappeared into the Washington traffic. Target is remaining in the dining room, Sarah reported. He's making a phone call. Marcus waited tensely as Sarah continued her surveillance. Patterson's phone call lasted several minutes, and from Sarah's descriptions, it sounded like he was arranging another meeting. This is bigger than we thought, Sarah whispered. He's coordinating multiple intelligence sales. We just witnessed one transaction in an ongoing operation. 20 minutes later, Patterson finally left the club. Marcus watched the general's sedan disappear into the night, carrying a traitor who had no idea his crimes had finally been documented. Eagle 1. Report status, Marcus said into his earpiece. Mission accomplished, Sarah replied, and Marcus could hear the satisfaction in her voice. I have everything we need. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he had been carrying for 6 years. Justice was finally within reach. 2 days later, Marcus and Sarah walked into the Pentagon Inspector General's office, carrying a comprehensive dossier that would end General Patterson's career and likely result in a lengthy prison sentence. The evidence was overwhelming: financial records, communication intercepts, and most damning of all, crystal-clear video footage of Patterson selling classified intelligence to foreign operatives. The investigation moved swiftly once the evidence was presented. Within a week, Patterson was arrested at his home in Arlington. The charges included treason, espionage, and conspiracy to provide aid to enemy forces. Marcus stood beside Sarah in the federal courthouse as Patterson was led away in handcuffs. The man who had betrayed his unit, who had caused Sarah to spend 6 years in exile, who had sold out countless soldiers for money, was finally facing justice. "It's over," Sarah said quietly, watching Patterson disappear into the courthouse. Marcus turned to look at her, seeing peace in her expression for the first time since she had revealed her identity at the checkpoint. "What will you do now?" Sarah smiled, and Marcus realized it was the first genuine smile he had seen from her. "I'm thinking about coming back to active duty. Turns out I missed being a soldier." Marcus felt a surge of hope. "The Army would be lucky to have you back." "Actually," Sarah said, her smile widening, "I was thinking about requesting assignment to your base, assuming you'd be willing to work with a soldier you once left behind." Marcus looked into her green eyes and saw forgiveness, determination, and the promise of a future built on truth rather than guilt. "I can't think of anyone I'd rather have watching my back." As they walked down the courthouse steps together, Marcus realized that sometimes the most important victories weren't won on foreign battlefields. Sometimes they were won by having the courage to face the truth no matter how painful, and the determination to make things right. Sarah Chen had spent 6 years fighting for justice, and in the end, she had not only caught a traitor, but had given Marcus something he had thought was lost forever: the chance at redemption. The commander who had once made an impossible decision had learned that sometimes the best way to honor the past is to fight for a better future. The woman he had thought was dead had returned not for revenge, but for justice, and in seeking that justice together, they had both found something neither had expected: the possibility of putting the ghosts of Afghanistan to rest and moving forward as soldiers who had finally come home.